Tell me about a time you handled criticism. Introduction. This is a common behavioral interview question for software developers, backend developers, full-stack developers, senior developers, and team leads. Interviewers ask this question to understand whether you can accept feedback professionally, whether you become defensive or stay open-minded, how you learn from criticism, whether you can improve your work based on feedback, how you handle code review comments, how you respond to feedback from QA, managers, senior developers, or stakeholders, whether you have a growth mindset. This question is especially important for check Java developers, backend developers, Spring Boot developers, full stack developers, junior software developers, senior software developers, team leads, Agile teams. The best way to answer this question is by using the STAR method. STAR means S, situation, explain the background. T, task, explain your responsibility. A, action, explain what you personally did. R, result, explain the final outcome. A good interview answer usually spends 10% situation, 10% task, 60% action, 20% result. The most important part is the action section, because interviewers want to understand how you listened, processed the criticism, changed your approach, and improved afterward. Question: tell me about a time you handled criticism. Example 1. Handling criticism about a large pull request situation. In one sprint, I submitted a pull request for a Spring Boot API feature. The PR included the API implementation, validation logic, tests, some refactoring, and small cleanup changes. A senior developer reviewed it and said the pull request was too large and difficult to review. Task: I needed to handle the criticism professionally and improve the pull request so the review could move forward. Action: at first, I felt the changes were related because they were all in the same area. But instead of reacting defensively, I listened to the feedback. The reviewer explained that the PR was difficult because it mixed X feature logic, X refactoring, X cleanup, X test changes, X formatting updates, X database-related changes. I realized the feedback was valid. A large PR made it harder for reviewers to focus on the actual business change and increased the chance of missing something important. I responded positively and split the work. I kept the main PR focused on API implementation, validation logic, required tests, required DTO changes. Then I moved unrelated cleanup and refactoring into separate follow-up tasks. I also improved the PR description by adding summary of change, reason for change, impacted APIs, testing completed, sample request and response, reviewer focus areas. Result: the pull request became easier to review. The reviewer approved it faster after the changes. After that, I started keeping my PRs smaller and more focused, which improved review quality and reduced back-and-forth comments. Why this answer works? This answer is strong because it shows openness to code review criticism, no defensiveness, practical improvement, better pull request process, team collaboration, long-term learning. Example 2. Handling criticism about missing test coverage situation. In one project, I completed a backend feature and submitted it for review. The code worked correctly for the main flow, but during code review, a senior developer pointed out that my tests mostly covered the happy path. They criticized that edge cases and failure scenarios were not covered enough. Task: I needed to respond professionally and improve the quality of the test coverage. Action: I reviewed the feedback carefully. The reviewer was right because I had focused mainly on successful scenarios.
I went back and added tests for
check missing required fields, invalid input, optional field missing, unauthorized user, forbidden role, empty result, duplicate request, downstream timeout, expected error response. I also added regression tests for a scenario QA had previously found in a similar API. Then, I updated the pull request description to mention the added test coverage. I asked the reviewer if there were any other risk areas they wanted me to cover. After that experience, I changed my development checklist. Before submitting backend work, I started checking cup, happy path, negative scenarios, role-based access, validation errors, edge cases, regression scenarios, error response format. Result: the PR was approved after the additional tests. QA found fewer issues during testing. The criticism helped me become more consistent about writing complete test coverage. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows accepting technical criticism, improving test quality, edge case thinking, regression testing, checklist improvement, growth mindset. Example 3. Handling criticism from QA situation. In one sprint, QA tested a new API feature and raised several defects. One of the comments was that my QA handoff notes were not detailed enough. They had to ask multiple follow-up questions about test data, expected errors, and role-based behavior. Task: I needed to handle the criticism constructively and improve how I handed work over to QA. Action: instead of seeing the feedback as negative, I asked QA what information would help them test faster. They explained that they needed test data, happy path scenario, negative scenarios, expected status codes, expected error messages, role-based access behavior, impacted regression areas, known limitations, environment details. I realized that my handoff was too focused on what I coded, not enough on how QA should validate it. I created a simple QA handoff template. The template included caption, feature summary, how to test, test data, API endpoint or screen, happy path, edge cases, expected errors, role scenarios, regression areas. I used the template for the same story and asked QA to review it. Result: QA testing became smoother. There were fewer repeated questions. The template was later reused for similar backend stories. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows: check, receiving QA criticism well. Check, improving communication. Check, supporting testing. Check, creating repeatable process. Check, team-first mindset. Example 4. Handling criticism about overengineering situation. In one sprint, I worked on a feature that required validation logic for one API. I suggested creating a reusable validation component because similar logic existed in other APIs. During review, another developer criticized the approach and said it might be overengineering for the current requirement. Task: I needed to evaluate the criticism honestly and decide whether my design should be simplified. Action: I listened to the concern carefully. The developer explained that a large generic validation framework would add unnecessary complexity. After reviewing the design again, I realized that part of the concern was valid. My original design was solving both the current problem and future possible problems. I adjusted the approach. Instead of building a broad validation framework, I created a smaller shared validator only for rules that were already duplicated. I kept API-specific rules inside the individual service. The updated design included common required field checks, common format validation, reusable error response structure, unit tests for shared rules, API-specific validation kept separate, clear documentation on when to use it. Result: the final design was simpler and easier to maintain. The team agreed with the revised approach. The criticism helped me balance reuse with simplicity. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows: yes, openness to design criticism. Yes, avoiding overengineering. Yes, practical refactoring. Yes, technical maturity. Yes, collaboration. Yes, ability to adjust. Example 5. Handling criticism about communication situation. In one sprint, I was working on an integration with another internal service. I was waiting for a downstream API endpoint to be available, but I did not raise the dependency as a blocker early enough. During the retrospective, my manager gave feedback that I should have communicated the risk earlier. Task: I needed to accept the criticism and improve how I communicated blockers. Action. I acknowledged the feedback and agreed that I should have raised the dependency sooner. I explained that I had expected the endpoint to become available quickly, but I realized that waiting silently created uncertainty for QA and planning. After the retrospective, I changed how I handled external dependencies. For future stories, I started raising potential blockers early by sharing. Check. What dependency existed? Which team owned it? What was blocked? What work could continue? Expected timeline. Risk to QA testing. Mitigation options. For the current issue, I contacted the downstream team, confirmed their timeline, and updated the product owner, Scrum Master, and QA. I also used mock responses so development could continue while waiting for the real endpoint. Result. The team had better visibility into the dependency. QA and the product owner could plan around the delay. After that, I became more proactive about communicating risks before they became full blockers. Why? This answer works. This answer is strong because it shows accepting manager feedback, communication improvement, dependency management, agile maturity, mitigation planning, behavior change. Example 6. Handling criticism about documentation situation. In one project, I updated a backend API response by adding a new field needed by the front end. The code and tests were completed, but I forgot to update the API documentation. A front-end developer pointed out that the documentation was outdated and caused confusion during integration. Task. I needed to accept the criticism and update the documentation quickly. Action. I acknowledged the issue and updated the documentation immediately. I added check, new response field, check, field description, sample success response, empty result example, validation error example, authorization behavior, impacted front-end screen. I also confirmed with the front-end developer that the updated documentation answered their questions. After that, I added documentation review to my pull request checklist. The checklist included API contract updated, sample JSON updated, OpenAPI or Swagger updated, QA notes updated, front-end integration notes updated. Result. The front-end integration confusion was resolved. The updated documentation helped QA as well. The criticism helped me become more consistent about keeping documentation aligned with code changes. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows accepting peer criticism, accepting documentation ownership, quick correction, accepting front-end collaboration, accepting checklist improvement. Example 7. Handling criticism about production logging situation. In one production support task, I added logs to help troubleshoot an API issue. During review, the security team criticized that some logs could expose more information than necessary. Task. I needed to handle the criticism seriously and improve the logging safely. Action. I reviewed the log statements with the security team. They explained which information could be risky. Risky log fields included full request payload, tokens, authentication headers, personal data, account details, internal exception details. I agreed that the concern was valid. I revised the logging to include only safe troubleshooting information. Correlation ID, endpoint name, status code, error category, processing step, timestamp, safe business reference. I also updated the troubleshooting guide so support teams could still investigate issues using correlation IDs. Then I added safe logging rules to our development notes. Result. The security team approved the updated logging. Developers still had useful information for troubleshooting. The criticism helped improve our safe logging process. Why this answer works. This answer is strong because it shows positive. Check. Security awareness. Check. Accepting cross-team criticism. Check. Production support thinking. Check. Safe logging. Check. Practical compromise. Check. Process improvement. Example 8. Handling criticism about estimation situation. In one sprint planning session, I estimated a report feature as a small task. After development started, we found hidden complexity around calculation rules, date filtering, time zone handling, export behavior, and large data volume. During the retrospective, the team gave feedback that the estimate was too optimistic. Task. I needed to accept the criticism and improve how I estimated similar work in the future. Action. I acknowledged that the estimate was too low. I reviewed why I missed the complexity. I had focused on the API implementation, but had not asked enough questions about calculation rules, date and time zone behavior, inclusive and exclusive date ranges, canceled records, large data volume, export format, QA test data, performance expectations. For future report or calculation-heavy stories, I started asking more scenario-based questions during refinement. I also broke down similar work into smaller parts. Backend calculation API, UI display, export functionality, advanced filters, QA data validation, performance testing. I shared this learning in the retrospective, so the team could improve estimation together. Result. My future estimates became more realistic. The team had better refinement discussions for reporting features. The criticism helped improve planning and reduced deadline risk. Why this answer works. This answer is good because it shows estimation accountability, at learning from feedback, at requirement analysis improvement, at better sprint planning, at team learning, at maturity. Best short answer version. If you need a short interview answer, you can say, in one sprint, I submitted a pull request for a Spring Boot API feature. The PR included the API implementation, validation logic, tests, refactoring, and some cleanup changes. A senior developer commented that the pull request was too large and difficult to review. Instead of becoming defensive, I listened to the feedback. I realized the reviewer was right because the PR mixed feature logic, refactoring, cleanup, tests, and formatting changes, which made the actual business change harder to review. I split the work by keeping the main PR focused on the API implementation, validation logic, DTO changes, and required tests. I moved unrelated cleanup and refactoring into separate follow-up tasks. I also improved the PR description with the summary, reason for change, impacted APIs, testing completed, and reviewer focus areas. As a result, the PR became easier to review and was approved faster. After that, I started keeping my pull requests smaller and more focused, which improved code review quality and reduced back-and-forth comments. Common mistakes to avoid. 1. Saying you do not get criticism. Bad answer. I do not usually receive criticism because my work is good. Better answer. I have received feedback in code reviews and retrospectives, and I try to use it to improve. 2. Becoming defensive. Bad answer. I explained why the reviewer misunderstood my work. Better answer. I listened first, understood the concern, and then adjusted my approach. 3. Choosing personal conflict. Bad answer. My manager criticized me unfairly. Better answer. Choose professional feedback about code, testing, communication, documentation, estimation, or process. 4. No action after feedback. Bad answer. I accepted the feedback. Better answer. I changed the pull request, added tests, improved documentation, or updated my checklist. 5. No long-term learning. Bad answer. The issue was resolved. Better answer. I changed my future process so the same criticism would be less likely to happen again. Best practices for answering this question. Check. Use the STAR method. Choose professional criticism. Show that you listened calmly. Avoid blaming or defending too much. Explain what you learned. Show the action you took. Mention measurable improvement. End with long-term behavior change. Keep the example positive. Show growth mindset. What interviewers are looking for. Interviewers want to see whether you can receive feedback professionally, stay calm, avoid defensiveness, learn from others, improve your work, collaborate during code review, accept QA or stakeholder feedback, turn criticism into growth. For senior roles, they also want to see hashtag humility, maturity, self-awareness, continuous improvement, ability to mentor through feedback, openness to cross-team concerns, ownership of improvement. Strong words to use in your answer. You can use words like listened, acknowledged, reflected, accepted, adjusted, improved, followed up, incorporated feedback, updated my checklist, changed my approach, became more consistent, learned. Example: I handled the criticism by listening first, understanding the concern, acknowledging where the feedback was valid, updating my work, and changing my process so I could improve consistently going forward. Good criticism topics you can use. Depending on your experience, you can talk about check. Pull request was too large. Missing test coverage. QA handoff notes were unclear. Design was overengineered. Blocker was not raised early enough. Documentation was outdated. Logs needed safer handling. Estimate was too optimistic. Code review feedback. Unclear communication and stand-up. Missing edge case. Testing. Too much scope in one change. Not enough regression testing. Unclear API response documentation. Not asking questions early enough. Final summary. Tell me about a time you handled criticism is an important interview question because software developers constantly receive feedback from code reviews, QA testing, managers, senior developers, security teams, and stakeholders. The best answer should include question: what criticism you received? Who gave the feedback? Why the feedback mattered? How you reacted professionally? What action you took? What changed in your work? What long-term improvement you made? Good examples include check. Large pull request feedback. Check. Missing test coverage. Check. QA handoff feedback. Check. Overengineering feedback. Check. Late blocker communication. Check. Outdated documentation. Check. Unsafe logging feedback. Check. Optimistic estimation feedback. The strongest answers show humility, self-awareness, openness, action, improvement, and long-term growth.